All right. Thank you so much for making time from your busy schedule today, Heather, and joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. The pleasure's ours. Just for context, these conversations will be part of our series where we explore how service leaders are navigating today's challenges. And so typically we'll start with some intros and then we'll dive in. So without further ado, please go ahead and introduce yourself and uh, then I'll follow.
Thank you. So I'm Heather Eason. I'm the founder and CEO of Select Power Systems. And what we do is we design the electric grid for utility companies. So our end client is probably the company that you pay your power bill to. So it's the Duke Energies of the world, those type of companies. And we also partner with a lot of other larger engineering firms where we'll be a subcontractor to them and help them to have the staff and the bandwidth and the capability they need to get their work done. So that's really our niche and really what we do. I've been in the industry for 3 decades now. I've got electrical engineering bachelor's and I've got an MBA. That's kind of the background. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. No, that sounds like a lot of fun. And I followed your journey a little bit from the corporate world to the CEO and the founder of Select Power Systems. And it's been, a lot of respect. And I can't wait to see what you guys have next in your subsequent chapter. So kudos to you on doing what you've done. And I think you've inspired a lot of women and young girls that are coming up, figuring out what a career in STEM. And I think we could totally use it as a country. We are lower than others when it comes to STEM education, and it's just a great story. So
Well, thank you. And I'm definitely passionate about supporting women and minorities in STEM. Our biggest challenge, I think, as an industry is the talent pool. We had a lot of really knowledgeable people that just retired post pandemic, and I understand it, but we allowed too much knowledge to walk out the door. We didn't do enough training and development for the next generation. And we've kind of backed ourselves into a corner, and we've got to figure it out as an industry. And we've got to decide how are we going to promote power engineering and how are we going to train the next generation. So that's really something I'm passionate about right now.
oh, that's great. And I'm glad that our ecosystem, as a country, we have incentives for women and minorities and other reserve categories to actually come up should they want to take the initiative. So I think we're in the right spot. The motivation is what needs some work. And, with leaders like yourself, there's a lot that we can accomplish. And from a minority owned business, right? It definitely it's we see the passion and the fire, and a lot of immigrants have written the story several times across the industry. So my name is Ian Duftry, and I know we've communicated via email, but for our listeners, I'm the host of the GrowthAmped podcast. And at GrowthAmped, we specialize in helping service providers scale their revenue and their business. And I'm always learning from leaders such as yourself on these podcasts. And the goal is to explore what challenges leaders are navigating, um, and see, what kind of thought leadership we can generate for current and future generations to come. So before we dive in, we'll start. So for the sake of our listeners, we'll start with Heather's company's background and industry trends that she's seeing, and then we'll discuss any current challenges and followed up with what the vision is as a CEO, what the vision is for the near term and the long term as far as Select Power Systems goes, and then you know we'll we'll wrap up with any next steps if it makes sense. Does that sound good?
It does. It definitely sounds good.
All right. So I know you've probably said this on a lot of other podcasts, but it's my duty to ask. Tell us, as a CEO, tell us a little bit more about your role and how it fits into the big picture. And of course, you can take us back to your a few years to how you came about into this role, so it'll kind of tie it together.
Yeah. So I was director of engineering for Siemens Energy, and I had the opportunity to start Select Power Systems. And that was 8 years ago. And I started the company with nothing. I mean, you want to talk about building an airplane, going down the runway, jumping out of it with a parachute. You hope and prayed you packed correctly because you just don't know. I mean, I definitely did it. There was no safety net under me, and it was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time, like I'm sure anybody that's jumped out of an airplane feels. And so I just want to say to anybody out there thinking about starting their own company, you're never going to feel comfortable. You're never going to feel ready. You're just going to have to jump. You're just going to have to take the leap of faith and you're just going to have to try it. And you're going to have to trust yourself and you're going to have to trust God and you're going to have to trust that everything's going to be okay. Plan the best you can. I did take 2 years to make sure I had my personal finances in order because I knew when I started this company, I wasn't going to make a salary for the first 3 years. And I didn't draw a penny for 3 years. So I had to get my personal finances to a point where I had as much paid off as I could. I had as much cash stacked in high yield savings to where I could make it those 3 years. Because when I started my company, I bootstrapped it, I self funded. I didn't go with an SBA loan. Years later, I did get some loan help to help with capital so I could staff up when we had periods of growth, which is something that I would like to also mention to your viewers. Cash is king. That's a fact. Have a positive relationship with your banking manager and get a line of credit in place as soon as you can because that's going to give you a buffer whenever you have clients pay invoices late. You're still going to have to make payroll. So
Yes.
having that line of credit gives you that buffer to be able to make your payroll without the stress and the anxiety. And
Yes.
I wish I'd have learned that sooner because let me tell you, I went through roller coasters where I was stressed. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to pay people on Friday. How am I going to make this happen? And even personal, how I'm going to make my personal mortgage payment. I mean, it was extremely stressful. And so that's just a little nugget for your listeners. Get a line of credit in place. It definitely helps with that stress and anxiety for making payroll, especially if somebody's late paying you. Because I don't know why in this industry, the utilities are notoriously late on paying us. Now, if you as a client don't pay,
Get cut off.
as a customer, they're going to cut your meter off. You're going to not have water. You're not going to have
Right.
power. But me as a subcontractor or a prime contractor, it's amazing. Over 90 days late is very common in this industry. And so it definitely is a challenge. And the, line of credit help buffers that. But, I just want to say what we do is very important. Power is a necessity for life at this point.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
have a electric power grid that, in my personal opinion, we have patched and we have duct taped together. And it's time we collectively put our brain power together and come up with the best solution, the right solution, modernize. We've got electric vehicles going on the grid, data centers. Oh my gosh, data centers are huge loads.
Yes.
We've got to figure out how we're going to power those things. It's new generation, it's new transmission, it's new substations, new distribution, it's new everything. And so we need all hands on deck. Anybody that's listening, if you're interested in power, please consider joining the industry. Reach out to me personally, contact me, let me know, what you're interested in, what your skills are. If I can't plug you in with my company, I might have a sister or a partner company or a brother company that I can plug you in at. If you're interested, we need the help. We need all hands on deck. This is a big enough puzzle piece that it's going to take all of us together to come up with a solution.
For sure. I think, and I thank you for the message, because as a user of sustainable energy and renewable solar and driving EVs, that was one of the biggest changes that I had to make personally in my life. Where we ditched one gas car for electric, then we added on the solar, and then we ditched the second one for an electric. So say what people think, right? We are carbon neutral in that sense, at least. So the only time I have to run or pull power from the grid is on really, really hot days when I can only produce, say, 60 kilowatt hours, and I'm at a little deficit because I have to run the AC a little longer. But most times it's a blessing in disguise, and I can't be happier going down that path, knowing that, hey, I'm taking some load off the grid. And with this duct tape and patchwork, right? We had this issue in Texas, I think, when there was the great freeze of 3 years ago or 4 years ago.
Hmm.
It was right, I think, at the peak, if not after the peak of COVID. And
Yeah, our middle son was living down there, and we were sending him propane heaters.
oh my gosh. Yeah, it was hard, and uniquely Texas does a grid does not interface with other states is what I heard, and so you probably know
Well,
a lot about.
they're predominantly standalone, but they do have interconnections now. For the
Okay.
longest time, they were completely independent, but they do interconnect now. But still predominantly, Texas has their own grid and their own regulatory body. And, after the big freeze, I had a friend of mine who's in the industry put a group of us together. We volunteered our time. He gathered information. We would meet once a week for an hour and we would go through the information and then we wrote a paper, our recommendation on how to solve the grid in Texas. Now, these were industry experts. I mean, I don't consider myself an expert. I've been in the industry 3 decades. I still have stuff to learn. But, Doug and the rest of the people on this group, they're gurus in the industry. Wrote this paper, sent it to Washington, ground filed it. They were like, thank you, but we have our own committee. The committee had 0 power engineers on it. We were a volunteer group that did it for free, took our time because we were passionate about
Mhm.
making something better and helping the people of Texas. So we did that for free and they round filed it. I was so upset.
Well, you had the best intentions for the people, and they had the best intentions for other parties involved, right? But no, that's very commendable. Yeah, ever since I've switched to this model with the renewable energy and the EVs, and how it's not a cost barrier anymore, right? The first EV that I owned uh, was back in 2019 when EVs were still expensive and hard to come by, and now it's cheaper, if not, yes, the same or not, or cheaper than owning a gas car. And if you're home every night, it's perfect.
Yeah, I
So,
think one of the things that I've seen personally as a barrier is the charging because if you have an older house, I'm in South Carolina, the South, we have older houses, farmhouses, mill villages. Well, those houses don't have current electrical up to code. So you
okay,
can't install the chargers in a lot of these older houses without upgrading the entire house or most of the house.
gotcha.
So
Got
you're looking at telling someone who lives in a small older house that maybe they inherited from grandparents that,
right.
hey, I know you want to charge your electric vehicle. You got to do $20,000 to your electrical wiring in your panel board before you can even get a charger. One of the things I ran across is Power Hero because they have a solution where you don't have to do that. You can use a 120 outlet,
Mm-hmm.
just a
Uh-huh.
regular outlet, to
Uh-huh.
plug in your charger, and your charger can charge your vehicle overnight. Patented technology, really cool. Matter of fact, I was so interested in it. I contacted Esmond, who's the owner, and I said, hey, I'm really excited about this. I think you've got a good solution. How can I invest and how can I be involved? So I'm both an investor and on the board.
Okay.
So, there are things out there that are coming, and I think that, the new technology is out there and people are amazingly smart and engineers, we're problem solvers at heart. That's what we love to solve problems. So it's like, give us a problem, let us solve it and come back to you. And I think Power Hero's done that with that solution. And they have some other options out there. They're actually multiple platforms and different things that Esmond's doing. But I just wanted to throw that in because I know you're charging your vehicle, and that is a barrier for some people.
Absolutely. In fact, I waited till I was back into a house until to buy an EV, because even though when I lived in apartments I had a garage and a 110 outlet, this probably didn't exist back in 2017, 2018, right? So
Nope,
I
it
think.
rolls out this December.
Oh, okay. So it's rolling out. So I think that'll be great news for those that are thinking, well, I have an apartment. Shoot, how do I do this? And I don't have more than a 110 with a 10 amp breaker or 15 amp breaker in the garage that can barely power a fridge. So yeah, because here, luckily, it's my house is not as old as some of the houses that you're talking about. So I could get the 240 amp is right in the garage, right next to the cars. So it was an easy 50 amp breaker and a NEMA plug, and we were able to just run it. And so we take turns every night one night's my charge, my car gets charged. The other, I work from home, so I do it every 3-4 days. I think this is very positive news, and although we don't talk about this too much in the podcast, but this is really cool content, and a good message to some of the folks that will end up listening to this. That hey, things are getting a lot easier on the EV adoption, and this is definitely, watch out for this in December. And yeah, if you don't mind sharing the link with me or any information that I can share in the description, I would gladly put it in there when I publish this.
Yeah, I will definitely do that. And anybody can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a message on LinkedIn. I typically will respond with my email address, and then you can email me. And then when I respond to that, it's got my full signature line. So you get my personal cell phone number. I no longer carry two phones. And that's another great thing about being a business owner is I don't have to carry two phones anymore. I've got one cell phone. It's business, personal, all
There we
combined.
go.
And I've had the same phone number since 2003 because you don't need to change your phone number when you move with a cell phone. So if you've ever had my number since 2003, you still have it. And I'll give anybody half an hour on my calendar. So I tell people, I'll send you my calendar link if you want to meet up and chat about whatever. I do 2 free hours of coaching each week. I just block my calendar
Oh, nice.
off to say, okay, and it can be anything. Ian, it's sometimes people are asking me career questions. Sometimes people are saying, hey, I want to start a small business. What would you recommend as first steps? Or I've owned this business for 3 years. This is what I'm going through. Do you have any recommendations? Sometimes it's just other women engineers that are like, hey, things are really challenging right now. I just need a cheerleader. And I
Absolutely.
understand that because I just went through a year where my husband had cancer stuff that he was going through. And praise God, actually, this morning his CT scan results came back, and we don't have to go back to the doctor for 6 months. He's in the once every 6 months, go just get checked out, make sure everything's good. But, let me tell you, during that time frame and I've always said this, if work is good and personal is crazy, I can handle it.
Right.
When personal is crazy and work is good, I can handle it. When they're both bad, I don't handle well. I
Yeah.
just don't. There's not enough
Absolutely.
gardening on the planet that I can do to
Yep.
keep my sanity about me. And
Yeah.
so that's when I think it's so important to have friends and networks and people like yourself that I can call up and I can say, hey, right now I'm overwhelmed with this or with that. Can you or your company help me out, or can you recommend somebody to help me out? And so I think that network is so important with small business owners.
Absolutely. Our mantra is also, how do we help small business owners? How do we support them and help them grow in their endeavors? Because the world is changing fast. Everybody's leaning towards technology to help automate the things that used to be very mundane. But I know, right? In when you're working with your hands, you can't do that with computer AI stuff. You're going to have the boots on the ground if you're pouring foundation, putting a data center and laying power lines for that. And so, I, like you said, power is here to stay. It's as important as oxygen. You can't deal without it. So, no, I appreciate that. And, I made a note to myself that I'm going to drop your LinkedIn in my video description as well for any future entrepreneurs, folks that need a little bit of guidance. And that's very generous of you to offer 2 hours a week of free coaching. I think it's good stewardship. It goes a long way. And, we all try our best to give back. And I think this is phenomenal. So as far as a typical day for you, right? What does that look like?
It can be so varied and it is so wild. Being an engineer, I love getting my hands on stuff. I love doing design. Unfortunately, I just don't get to do it as much anymore. When you're a small business owner, you go through the phase where you're the back office, so you are the accountant, you're the lawyer, you're the marketing, sales development, you are everything. And so you go through that and then you get to the point where you grow enough that you can start to hire a couple people to help you. And that's great, but you got to train them and then you got to make sure you manage them and make sure things are getting done. So from day to day, it just varies what I do. And honestly, it depends on if I'm plugging new people in or if I've got somebody that I'm moving to a new role. Or I had a client that kind of became a problem because one of my employees did not behave properly. He kind of took advantage of the fact that I didn't have my hands on the steering wheel while my husband was sick, and he took advantage of that and did some things that he shouldn't have done. So I spent a lot of time after that just doing rebuilding client relationships and doing the networking.
Mhm.
So yeah, it depends every day. But I will say this, the one great thing is working remote.
Yes.
We have been remote since the beginning, since 2017. So we were remote pre-pandemic. So when the pandemic happened, we just kept rolling.
Right.
And it gives me an advantage with hiring because I say, hey, look, as long as you have good internet access and you've got an office where you can shut a door, be productive and high quality, and your clients are happy, I don't care where you sit when you do your work. You can sit at your home office. You can be in your car waiting on your kid's school bus to get home. You can be at the beach, wherever. I don't care.
Right.
You know, get your job done, be productive, high quality, make sure your clients are happy and I'm happy. And so I think that's a great thing about, the remote workforce and the talent pool and who we can pick up. And also, I mean, we're not commuting. So we're personally saving that time and energy and I mean, clothing. I used to wear a suit every day to work. I hadn't worn a suit in years. I don't even know if I have one in the closet that would fit. There's a lot of benefits to remote working. And as a small business, reduce your overhead. Don't pay the rent on a brick and mortar building.
Absolutely.
One of the things that as I'm talking to small business owners, they're like, well, I want to rent a class A building for my company.
Right.
And I'm like, do you know how much that costs every month?
Right.
And then, even after you rent the space, you got to outfit it. You got to pay for all the utilities. I'm like, that's expensive. I'm like, you could hire 3 more people work from home for the
Correct.
price
Correct.
of the rent for a brick and mortar office building. So, think outside the box and get creative. As a small business owner, we can do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because unless you have inventory or that you have to carry, there's no need, right? You don't need a place to house all your supplies if you don't have to carry them and you can order them just in time. And yeah, unlike COVID, if the is just in time availability is still up and running, yeah, save it, invest it in your business instead of dead space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So I think that's something else, as small business owners listen to your podcast about growth and amping things up, look at the cost cutting. See if it makes sense to get rid of your brick and mortar rental office space and see if it works for you and your staff.
exactly. Let's shift gears for a second and talk about any industry shifts and challenges. I kind of combine these because a lot of times they're tied. There's a shift in the industry and it creates challenges. Of course, there's opportunities, but let's talk about shifts and challenges that you're seeing right now.
Think something that is shifting and challenging right now is AI.
Hmm.
Everybody's talking about AI. I don't think anybody's got it figured out. AI to me is a tool that once you learn how to use it properly can be very beneficial. But I don't think AI is the silver bullet that a lot of people think it's going to be. I think it's just going to be another tool that we're going to use. And I think that AI is going to be really good at like the CRM type stuff and the outreach and things like that. But I just don't see, I tell people, if you're an engineer or designer in this field, you don't have to worry about AI taking over. There's no way AI could figure out all these different schemes. And I mean, the old stuff, we've got some really old stuff still out there that we have to figure out how to integrate and upgrade and modernize. And you can't just go in and rip that stuff out. You have to be precise and surgical with how you take things out and replace it. And so I don't see AI totally killing the economy. I think it's a tool that if we learn how to use it would be great. I think the challenge is everybody's asking how. How will AI help small businesses?
Right. No, that's very appropriate. It can't replace all the thing that's all the touch and feel and tangible aspects of implementing a power grid, or for that matter, it's not smart enough to do the designing, given all the environmental constraints and the other regulatory things yet, right? But someday they'll have it figured out. So that being said, how do you view the future of energy? And I think you covered this part. I had it tied into my questions. What's the advice to newcomers? So you did kind of cover some of this, other than it being the essential, one of the, few essential elements of life in 2025 and onwards. How do you view the future of energy? Any other comments?
Yeah, so I see the future being more diverse. If If we've learned anything, is that diversity is key. Diversity reduces risk, and reduced risk and uncertainty is very positive. So we're going to have a more diverse fuel mix. We're going to have the renewables. They're going to be part of it, but oil and gas is going to be part of it, as well as nuclear. Nuclear is going to come back on. We have to
Hmm.
have nuclear. We can't have the volume that
Yeah.
we need for data centers without nuclear being part of the mix. So the U.S. has to get back into nuclear. And within my lifetime, I think the only nuclear plants that have been built were down in Atlanta, Georgia area with Georgia Power. They built some new nuclear down there. I don't think anybody else has built any. I know that there's a lot of plans to modernize and bring old units back up, as well as some half-built units.
Hmm.
They're looking at finishing those out, and they're looking at building, but they're looking at building more small reactors. SRMs. I think that is going to be a new industry that we haven't seen before that's going to come up. So I see more diverse fuel mix, and I see, you know, I think we're going to get to where we've got the modernized grid, and we've got the intelligence where we're going to get to the point where we're going to be able to reduce the outage time again. It used to be the grid was very, very reliable, which you have to have reliable power for this industry. I remember there was an extrusion plant that, unfortunately, a friend of mine totally just had a senior moment and flipped the wrong breaker switch and took out an extrusion plant. And because they didn't have power, everything seized up. I didn't even know that was a thing. He didn't get fired, but they definitely put him in a closet, if you know what I'm
Sure.
talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you've ever had a
Absolutely.
corporate job, you've seen people put in a closet, and he was.
Mission critical stuff that goes down and it's a human error, then yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. It's not great to be on the receiving end of that for sure.
No. And he's a great engineer, great guy, really, really good guy. So a couple years fast forward, he's got his life back together, his career's back on track, and everything's good. But boy, that 15-minute outage, I
Yeah.
mean, it was pure panic. And like I said, it was devastating for the extrusion plant. And so, power has to be reliable. You've got to know that when you flip on your light switch that it's going to come on. You've got to know that, the cooling and the heating is going to work. You've got to have that reliability and consistency in your life. And so I think that all this EV load and data center load is not only going to give us a more diverse mix, I think we're going to have to go back in and replace. We've got transmission lines that are 60 years old.
Yep.
Let's start these transmission upgrade projects. Let's do that. Let's get, let's shore up the grid. I think in the end, we're going to have a better, more modernized, more reliable, and I think it's going to, it's going to have more security. It's going to be more sustainable. I think we're going to have a better grid overall at the end of this. I really, truly do. I'm excited about the future.
Well, that's good. And I see personally also, right? If you look at 10 years ago versus today, um, we are making subtle changes or manufacturers of microelectronics are making subtle changes where we're using a lot more of the 3.5 volt USB powered lights and gadgets as opposed to power adapter step down from to 12 volt and 9 volt from 110. So do you feel like that has alleviated some of the pain or the load just by that gradual switching that we've made as consumers?
It is so minimal. It's not making an impact yet. I think over time that it will. It's the switch from incandescent to CFL light bulbs. Did we really see a huge baseload decline when we did that? No, we didn't really. But, as more and more people continue to adopt CFLs over incandescent light bulbs, yeah, I mean, it's making an impact. It's very small, but it is an impact. And I contend that IEEE standards committees
Uh-huh.
are really what's driving that. And behind that, they've done a great job. My husband mentioned yesterday, we got new cell phones for the first time in 3 years.
Okay.
And so I was asking him, I was like, because typically when you get a new phone, you got to get a new charger.
Right.
And so I was asking him, hey, do we need to get new chargers? And he's like, no, these are standardized now. And I'm like, oh,
Yep.
yeah, that's right. The IEEE committee standardized the
It did.
charging.
Yep.
And it's great that the IEEE committees are there, not just for high voltage, but also for low voltage to help,
Absolutely.
all these companies, all these product companies to standardize. And that standardization drives down the price for consumers.
Correct. And
Now we've
landfill.
got exactly landfill
Mm.
reduction, which is another one of my pet projects that so I'm 51% owner of Sustainable Fuel Tech. We use SMRF patented technology. The goal is to get an investor so we can start building these things, close landfills, take all the trash instead of going to landfill. Let's close the landfill. Let's take it to the production facility, put it through this patented technology. On the other side of it, you're going to get out green diesel, which is clean. And the patented process of this, the reason why I'm so excited about it is because all other green diesel out there still has to go to a refinery and get additional processing. This green diesel is so pure and so clean, you use it immediately. It doesn't need additional refining.
Wow, this is
Yeah,
new.
it is amazing. Pedro's a nuclear engineer. He's the one that's behind this patented. He's the one that, did all the laboratory testing, the proof of concept. He is just phenomenal. I'm in awe of his intelligence, and I'm just hoping that I can do my part to someday start closing landfills and making clean green diesel.
So what you're saying is there's a patent out there to convert e-waste into green diesel, and we're
It can take any waste except metals.
okay.
So instead of your trash trucks going to a landfill, the trash trucks will go to the production facility, and it can take anything that's not metal.
Okay. So has to be biodegradable and turn into biodiesel. Is that what it
If
is?
it's biodegradable, then you get a very high, for example, if I could get forestry
Sure.
waste, I could get very high production output out of that. But yeah, forestry waste, as long as we can get the moisture content down, we can get very high. And I don't know off the top of my head, I should know the numbers of how many tons of forest material at such and such a, moisture level will equal so many gallons. I don't have that off the top of my head, but yes, that is the process.
Wow, this is brilliant. So you're thinking, I guess for our viewers, we might get to see another division of Select Power Systems that is all about this new patented technology and joining forces with the other founder that you mentioned.
Yeah, so SMRF is another company. It's completely standalone from Select Power Systems. Sustainable Fuel Tech is I'm 51% owner, Pedro's 49%. And then I think some of Pedro, a few percent he gave to a friend of his named Giuliano, but it's predominantly me and Pedro that are behind it. And SMRF is the company over across the pond that Pedro got all of his patents through.
Nice.
Sustainable Fuel Tech, my company, or 51% owned company, has the IP patent license to use the SMRF patented technology in the US exclusively.
Hmm.
So if
Okay.
it's a US based manufacturing facility, it's exclusive to us. Now, if it's overseas, then, SMRF can have a different partner and they can go a different way. But it's
Sure.
nice for me to have the contract in place to where anything in the USA is going to be under Sustainable Fuel Tech because we own the IP rights to that patent.
That's phenomenal, man. I'm gonna have to get all these links from you to share with, because this has been one of the most enriching podcasts I've done, and we're only 40 minutes in, and I, you're blowing my mind with all this information, because as spending 20 years in the US, I have realized that we don't do enough for sustainable energy, because we're all about the dinosaur fuels, right? Or we have been in the traditionally. So this is really refreshing, and it opens a lot of doors and ideas to aspiring environmental and power generation and enthusiasts, professionals, students alike.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I look at it as I've got 4 kids that are hopefully going to give me a ton of grandkids at some point. I've got to make the earth a better place for my grandchildren than it is for me. So I've got to make a positive improvement wherever I can. And I think sustainability is important.
Absolutely. Let's talk about how has the move to a more diverse mix, the industry turn that is, affected your business and your growth strategy overall at SPS.
There's a little bit of a change where the electric utilities want the security of these large mega firms. So they'll have like 3 to 5 of the large mega firms that they go to. And they don't want the risk level of a company my size. For example, if Santee Cooper and Westinghouse are going to go out for their rebuild of the Fairfield Jenkinsville nuclear site, that's too large of a project for me to take on. Quanta or some crazy large company like that could do it, but I couldn't. So I'm going in and I'm saying, okay, I'm not wanting this project. I want just a very small slice of it. Let me be a third party project manager. Let me have oversight. Let me make sure scope, schedule, and budget is aligned to where it needs to be. Let me be your owner's engineer. Let me be your voice, and let me be your, mole. I want to be able to go in and know what they're saying, when you're not there, and be able to tell you, hey, this is saying on the schedule it's on track, but really there's concerns that it's not going to pass XYZ, so that I can be that third party, neutral, independent person that can say, hey, let me manage this for you. Let me help you out. I can't design it. I don't have the expertise in house, nor would I want to if I did, but I can do the project management of it. So that's one of the changes that we made is, okay, let's carve out smaller pieces, project management, owner's engineer, those type of roles. And so we're not necessarily going after the big ones anymore. We do still do the 3 and 5 year blankets where it's, engineering and design for the next 3 to 5 years of substations or of transmission or of distribution or of renewables, or we want somebody to help out with interconnects or whatever. We can definitely, and we'll still always do that. But as the mega projects come through, we're going to focus more on how do we take a slice of that pie,
Right.
because we can't bite the whole pie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't boil the ocean, but if you have a bucket in hand, at least you can take out a bucket at a time. And you totally spoke to the project manager inside me when you said scope, schedule, and budget. I got a little excited. Okay, no, that's good. The background definitely helps in terms of uh, your company. What's working well for you right now, and what's been challenging? I think this you just covered some of the challenging stuff, right? How do you get into the larger projects, and how do you get a foot in the door with some of these larger companies, even if it's like, hey, let's just manage a small piece of it, or we'll do this part that is part of the big picture, BMO, all that stuff. Is there anything you want to add to that, the challenge aspect, and then we can come to what's working well?
Yeah, I mean, I think challenges are always, how do you stick to your core? When I started Select Power Systems, I literally wrote down on a piece of graph paper what I call the archway philosophy. And I passed it across the table to my husband. And I said, hey, give me a tab on the website with this. And my husband, being a web designer, whipped it out in, I think, an hour. And I'm like, okay, the archway philosophy is how I'm going to manage this company. And it's going to be how we're going to make decisions and what our focus is going to be. And so as we've gone through 8 years of growth, we always have to go back to that and remember that. And, at this point, I'm getting requests from the larger companies to buy us. I'm getting, private equity reaching out to me. Hey, we want you to be a platform company, and let's bolt on some other companies, and let's, grow this conglomeration, this Titanic. And I'm like, I think all those are great, but, at the end of the day, the archway philosophy, employees are the base, and I do not want to sacrifice our culture and our focus of, I told somebody earlier today, I said, if I was happy, my employees were happy, and my clients were happy, I didn't care what P&L report said. And I really didn't. And, I'm like, because if I take care of myself, my employees, and my clients, we're going to have long-term longevity in this industry.
Yes.
And I don't care if I make a ton of money, as long as we're here and we're doing the right thing, we're making a positive impact.
Yeah. No, for sure. Is there any, I think you're pretty clear on the intent and what is your philosophy to run, what defines success, right? Is there any metrics that you're focused on improving in the next short term, long term?
That's a tough one, I'll be honest with you. And the reason why is because I did work for corporations where when you had P&L responsibilities, KPIs were battered about your head and shoulders and beat you up with every quarter. And I just did not like that. That was not comfortable. It wasn't fun. And to be honest, it really did not help me improve. It's like, okay, yeah, the numbers didn't go up as much as you thought they would have or what was forecasted. Yes, this happened or that happened that were out of my control. I mean, if if a client delays a project because of funding delays, that's not in my control. I can't help that, and at large corporations, they just beat you up about it, and I'm like, I just don't want to do that. Here stuff happens. Yeah, yeah, it happens. It sucks, learn from it, move forward. Let's see if we can do better in the future. But, don't let it beat you up. Don't let it bring you down. And so I don't have, and I know it sounds odd, I don't have any KPIs. I
Okay,
tell people, do your job, be productive, high quality, because I am a stickler on quality. That's
sure,
probably the thing that, if you've got poor quality scores, I'm going to be calling you. But yeah, other than that, the traditional KPIs, the revenue 10x targets, I don't
sure.
do that.
Okay.
The profit and loss, I can't tell you the last time I looked at the P&L report. I'll just be honest with you.
It's definitely a unique and insightful take, and it's taken me a minute to digest it, but that's good. I feel like you are putting the humans before the numbers. Honestly, when you said if a project is late because of funding delays, it made me think, would you rather have a project that is late getting started due to funding delays, or would you rather have a project that gets completed or gets to completion, but the funding gets delayed after we've put all this time in it? I think the former is a better situation, right?
Well, the former is definitely better because the later affects your cash flow negatively.
Yep. So it was good that you shared that nugget in the beginning. That when you're a small business owner, make sure that you leverage that banking relationship. That's key to helping your cash flow when there's adversity in customers' payment schedules and whatnot. So I think a lot of customers like to just say, "Oh, we said net 30 or net 60," and you're just gonna have to wait. And there's nothing you can do because it's in the contract.
Yeah. I and I can say that as you go through the different cycles of a business, it is important to make profit. I don't want to, kid people and make people think that, people over profits all the time. You have to be profitable to stay in business.
Sure.
Just for financial health, you need to
Yes.
make a profit. So I don't want to say, you put your people first and you just totally ignore the profits, because you have to have financial health and financial stability for long-term longevity.
Yeah. No, for sure. In the words of my econ professor, right? The goal of a business is to make money, whether it's a buck or 10, right? That is the goal. The moment you go in the negative, your business is not viable and it affects people. So, oh well. You've probably heard this term thrown out a lot, right? Ideal customer profile. Do you have one?
No, I have not sit down and written that out yet, but I can definitely tell you who I like working with and who I don't like working with. There are definitely clients that are easy to work with and work with you and work together with you and are a partnership in completing whatever you got to get done. And then there are other clients that, I don't know, they're almost adversarial with you. And that's just not fun. That's not comfortable. And that's another good thing about being a small business as opposed to a corporation. When you're a corporation, you got to put up with that. As a small business, you can fire clients. I did the other week, and let me tell you, I got a small little poodle, 20-pound toy poodle, and I picked him up and I danced around the living room. And my husband came running. And he's like, "What are you doing? What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I'm celebrating with the dog. I just fired a client." He's like, "You're excited? You fired a client?" And I'm like, "Yes." They were difficult, they
Yes.
were adversarial, and they were always late. They had to go.
Yeah.
And so we finished up the work that we were, on the hook for doing, because we're going to have integrity. If we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it and we're going to do it correctly. But as soon as that last project was done, it was like, woohoo, we're not taking any more work. Yay!
Yeah. Wish list versus not appropriate word list, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that we've all had those, and yeah, that's definitely agree with you on that one. Okay, we've covered, I think, quite a bit as far as how you guys are doing, what your challenges are. Really, the next question was going to be any other goals that you have in 12 to 24 months. Do you feel like that's something you can add on
Yeah, I think
business
that
growth?
I think I'm going to need to get to the point where I'm going to have to quit being a workaholic. I'm definitely not a micromanager. I will hand an employee something and say, "I'm here to support. If I don't hear from you, I expect it to be done by the due date and just leave it with them.
Yep.
I'm not a micromanager. I don't check in every day. I don't look over progress work. I don't do any of that, but I am a workaholic and I will tell my employees I don't want them working more than 45 hours a week and then I work 60. So I've got to, for myself, do a better job of that and, free myself up to be able to focus on more of the things I'm passionate about, doing more outreach in STEM and doing more education, helping more small business owners, as well as, sustainable fuel tech. I've got to get it funded and I've got to find an investor for that. So that's something that I haven't done because I've been so busy with Select Power Systems, but I'm going to have to find a way to free myself up to do the other things that I'm passionate about.
Absolutely. No, that's very spot on. Last wrap up question. If you had a magic wand, what is one thing that you would fix in your business that is either holding you back or slowing you down from accomplishing your dream goals?
I'll be honest with you, that's a tough one because I've had the opportunity to design the company the way I wanted to. So I kind of took everything that I'd done prior to starting the company. The things I liked, I kept. The things I didn't like, I got rid of. And so anything that I just don't enjoy, I've predominantly gotten rid of or delegated, unfortunately. The people that work for me, they probably hate that. Gives them the opportunity to learn how to do stuff. They can grow and stretch in their roles and, take some off of me. So I think it's a win-win. But yeah, I don't really have anything that I hate. I don't have anything keeping me up at night anymore. I've been able over 8 years to work through those things and get rid of them and improve processes. So I think I'm at a pretty good spot now. I'm sure as we go through another growth phase, there's going to be, growing pains and things that we've got to go through. I think AI, learning how to use it as a tool is something that, I need to do better on. I'm kind of this year looking at it as an education. So I joined the board of Furman University. They have a AI certificate program. And so I'm helping that. And I've got an employee going through the program, getting the certification. So I'm looking at this year's education on AI and hopefully next year I can implement some AI tools.
No, that's great. So yeah, I really appreciate you making time off your busy schedule. I probably took an hour up of your otherwise that you could have spent mentoring and helping others. So I really appreciate you jumping on with me and sharing all your insights. I think I've learned a lot today, just from your leadership and your lessons. So, is there anything you would like to state in a closing message before we, end the recording?
Yeah. So my motto is we all have the power to make a difference. And I truly believe that. So if you've listened to this and something's kind of itching at you that, you want to do something and you want to make an impact, go for it because we all have the power to make a difference. So I encourage everyone to step out of your comfort zone and go after it because you can do it and you can be successful.
Thank you. Yep, that's Heather's message for all the aspiring, uh, founders or students of uh, energy or beyond, and anyone that needs a little pep in their step. So, thank you, Heather, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and uh, we'll conclude the recording now.
Thank you.